Hey there, ho there, hi there, mathletes, math friends, and even enemies of math. Thank you for tuning in today. We're going to be talking about perfect square trinomials. I'm going to go over a couple examples of these. And really what I want to do is kind of break down these formulas. First of all, you'll notice we have two here. We have two separate ones because it all depends on what we're given. So if we're given a minus sign in between the first two terms, we're going to use this first one. If we're given a plus sign, we're going to use the second one. So all I really want you to think about right now is this, okay? In my first example, I have a minus sign. So I'm going to use this just to give you, show you really what it means. So all this thing that I boxed is what I gave you, right? So these match up, right? The first term goes with the first term. The second term, we'll figure out what that means in a second. And then the last term goes with the last term. So we don't really need to know or plug anything into this formula that I boxed. All we really care about is this right here, okay, the 2ab. And in order to find a, we're going to need to know what a squared is and what b squared is. So I match this up, right? A squared goes with n squared. So a squared is equal to n squared, and then b squared goes with the last term, or 9. So b squared is equal to 9. So if you remember from the difference of squares, right, if I want to get this to just become a, I have to take the square root of both sides. And we know, even though we don't see it on this list of perfect squares here, the square root of a squared, it just becomes a, right? Because remember, square root, that means it has an index of 2 inside there. Basically, we're doing 2 divided by 2, just becomes a. So if the square root of a squared is a, then the square root of n squared is just n, right? So now what we have is we've figured out our a. B squared, again, I'm going to take the square root of it. If I take the square root of a variable squared, or b squared, it just becomes outside the radical, and it becomes an exponent of 1. I'm also going to take the square root of 9. That is just 3. So now I've figured out what a and b are. So this thing that I circled up here before, the reason I'm saying all we care about is that is because we already were given a squared and b squared. What we have to figure out is the 2ab part. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 2ab. What is that equal to? Well, the 2 doesn't change at all. 2ab is just 2 times my a, right? My a is n, so times n, and then times my b, times my b. So what does that equal to? Well, it's 2 times n times 3. Or 2 times n times 3. So this is just going to become 6n. So what you have to figure out is this a perfect square trinomial? The way you figure it out is if you take your a and b and you multiply it by 2, is it your middle term? So what was our middle term, right? Let's take a look. Our middle term was 6n. Our a was n, and our b was 3. So 2 times a times b gave me 6n. So what I can do now is I can use this formula here. Why that formula? Because it has a minus sign. And that's how I'm going to factor. So a minus b squared, in my case, is just going to be, change the color up here for you. It's just going to become, n minus 3 squared. And we have ourselves an answer. N minus 3 squared. So we can try another example here. Now for this one, I'm going to use that second formula, which is a plus b squared. So this is the factored form. This is what I'm trying to get to. It's a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So remember, all we care about is we need to figure out if I multiply a times b times 2, will I get a middle term of 10? In order to figure out, or 10x rather, in order to figure out if I'm right, I have to first figure out what a squared and b squared are, right? So I can match these up again. A squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So a squared is x squared. B squared is 25. Doing the same thing here, the square root of a squared is just a. The square root of x squared is just x. And then the square root of b squared and the square root of 25. The square root of b squared is just b. The square root of 25 is 5. So now what I have to do is I have to figure out, okay, let's do 2ab. And let's try it out. 2 times my a is x and my b is 5. So what's 2 times x times 5? Well, 2 times 5 is 10, and then we just have the x, 10x. Is 10x my middle term? It is. So this means it's a perfect square trinomial. So I can go ahead and I can use this formula. So let's use it. A plus b squared. What's my a? My a is x. Let me do a different color here for you. So my a is x, and my b is just 5. Why do I use the plus sign? Because I had a plus sign in between my first and second terms. And now this just becomes squared. So x plus 5 squared. We've factored it. We've done it. So hopefully you're starting to notice. Again, the reason why I have this perfect squares list, perfect squares list, the reason why I have it is because if you notice, 9, 25, both of these are on my perfect squares list. N squared, n times n. I'm multiplying the same thing by itself. I get n squared. That's a perfect square. Perfect square. All right, let's go down here. X times x. I'm multiplying the same thing by itself. I'm getting x squared. This is also a perfect square, right? No different than when I do 3 times 3 and it gives me 9, or 5 times 5 and it gives me 25. So hopefully this helped you out. If you have any questions, just let me know. Peace out.